Facilities Committee to order. Monica, I'm sorry. Having trouble with that today.
That's why they give us
please call the
7-year terms to get her name right.
All right, Chair Beard.
Good.
Vice Chair Huizenga.
Present.
Governor Carter.
Here.
Governor Chopra.
Present.
Governor Levine.
Here.
Governor Link. Here. And Governor Morton.
Here.
Chair Beard, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to welcome our new members. We have 4 new members on our committee. Mr. Levine, Ms. Link, Mr. Morton, and our new vice chair, Mr. Huizenga. So y'all welcome, and I'm looking forward to working with y'all on this very important committee, and I'm sure we'll keep it interesting and have a lot of interesting things to do and deal with in this next coming year. So thank you. The first thing on our committee meeting agenda is to approve the minutes of the November 7th and January 16th, 2013 meeting. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the State University System Debt Guideline discussion. As you may know, we got a letter from Governor Scott to our chair requesting additional information to be considered by this board when we're talking about bonding, borrowing funds for university facilities. Chairman Colson has responded to this letter, indicating that this board would consider the matter further. And so what we're planning to do is add the 3 items that he requested, along with whatever the legislature might change in the next during this legislative session, plus whatever we might be able to get that was presented to the legislature with President Vance's task force. And so there'll be a lot of changes coming to the debt guidelines. So what I would like to suggest, and what we've done in the past, is that we ask the Chancellor to put together a drafting group that would consist of university and board and members to make the changes to the debt guidelines that will be needed after the legislative session is over with. Is there any discussion about this issue by the members of our committee? If not, Chancellor Brogan, would you please do so?
Yes, sir. Consider it done.
Thank you very much. We have 2 action items, and that's the approval of 2 debt issues that have been requested. But before we get into that, and before I call on Chris, I'd like to just mention to the new board members that this kind of thing doesn't just show up on our desk. It goes through a multiple set of processes. Certainly, first of all, the university has to decide whether they need these facilities or not. And once they decide they need the facilities, they have to convince the administration of that. Then the Board of Trustees generally has a work group, and that work group analyzes it and discusses it, and it's eventually approved by that work group. And then after the work group, it goes to the Board of Trustees, and they review and approve it. And then after the Board of Trustees, it goes to our board staff, and they review and approve it. And then after the board staff, it goes to the board of the state bond department, and they review and approve it. And then finally it gets to us. And then if we approve it, it goes to the cabinet. And so, I mean, I don't know how many steps that is, Chris, but it's 6 or 7 or 8. So there's a lot of people looking at this stuff before it ever gets to us. So it's, you might not understand that when it's just suddenly here, but everything's been looked at very carefully. So the first debt approval that we're going to look at is the Florida State University request to finance construction of a student residence facility. And Chris, could I get you to walk us through this? And this facility, by the way, will replace 50-year-old buildings that are of the old style that I used to live in. So Chris, why don't you?
Thank you very much, Mr. Beard, members of the committee. The first item is for Florida State University, and it's a resolution of the board requesting Division of Bond Finance of the State Board of Administration, Governor Cabinet, to issue revenue bonds on behalf of FSU. So this sort of reflects the multiple stages of approval that these things have to go through, as the chair indicated. I want to, since this is the first of these packages we've seen, with the new board members, I want to explain to all members what we do. We work closely with the Division of Bond Finance, and at the point that the university wants to issue debt, they submit a package in accordance with those guidelines to staff of the board and staff of Division of Bond Finance. We both get the same package, and it has to be in compliance with the guidelines. We have a checklist. We review it independently, and then we compare notes. When we say, okay, well, the number on page 47 doesn't match the number on page 1A. Even though they've been scrubbed and vetted, we take each deal as if, we don't take anything for granted. So we review it independently. We provide the university our comments. If we have substantive comments, we might say, why are you using capitalized interest? We don't understand that. Or we do understand it. Why aren't you using Cap I? We'll go through this. If we see anything that looks to be an exception to the guidelines, we'll try to either bring it into conformity, or explain why. Because these are guidelines. We're also bound by Florida Statute 101062, so we have to make sure, of course, it's not only within the guidelines, but it's within the statute. Then we work on this package. We have an agenda item. There's a project summary. There are also the formal resolution. The formal resolution is pretty much standard on every deal because we try, for legality, we try to keep the resolutions as consistent and uniform as possible. There's a sources and use table, and there is financial performance. So for each and every deal, those are the 5 standard documents we've seen. Now, in addition, because of the governor's letter, we have added some additional information that we typically would not include in the board package because we're sensitive that, of your time and materials. But we've added a project feasibility study. These are typically done, but we keep those internally. But those are now in here. We also have an independent study as well, and a cover letter that makes it clear that the universities are very much aware of this additional level of scrutiny and oversight that the governor wishes to bring. This package has been shared with the governor's office, and our initial feedback is that the package has done much to answer the questions, and I believe at this point the questions have been answered to the best of my knowledge with the governor's office, with the staff I've dealt with. And I'll go into the details. I do want to also say, in addition to President Barron and President Rosenberg, there are staff here, and so any questions that I can't answer, I'd be very glad to recognize staff, and they may not be, but to help me in answering any specific questions. So this specific for FSU is the proposed committee action is for the issuance of fixed rate tax-exempt revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $51.4 million. The package has been reviewed. It has no exceptions to the debt management guidelines. The purpose of this of the new money will be used to build a new dormitory, 2 buildings, 431 beds each. But as Governor Beard said, as soon as the new facility is open and ready for occupancy, which is fall of 15, if I'm not mistaken, they will take down an old dormitory, so the net on the beds is somewhere around 300 beds. So what FSU has been in an ongoing process of renovating all old facilities or replacing the old facilities. And so with this process, they have 4 more to go, and this will get them down to 3. And FSU has maintained a very healthy waiting list. They have no policy that they require freshmen to live on campus. It's very desirable. Most students, as I was a freshman at FSU, they want to live on campus, but it's not required. And in fact, they can't all live on campus because there's not enough housing to accommodate them. FSU feels very strongly that this traditional residential experience with the resident advising and the living learning communities is very successful. They've tracked the data. They find that it does improve long-term graduation rates if your first year of college is living on campus. So they don't have no plan to change that. There's no required meal plan. There's no special fees. So I can cover this in some more detail, but I think that's the long and the short of the project. And so I'd be glad to take any questions, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Are there any questions by the members of the committee? Mr. Chairman.
Are these questions regarding this issue per se?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Look on page 135 of the what we were distributed. It said the interest rate would be 5.75 for 20 years.
Correct. And is your question, why is it so high?
Well, you know probably where I'm going to go because we had this conversation privately. Not particularly on point to this specific issue, but this is more of a systemic and more of an observation for the governor, the legislature, the Board of Governors to consider. Many creative approaches have been taken by states around the United States with the issuance of tax-exempt bonds on behalf of their state university system. And whereas these bonds carry the implied warranty or guarantee of the state of Florida, certainly suggesting that if we had financial difficulty with any state university, the state would make sure that the bonds were paid and covered. Some states take that another step further. They guarantee the bond so that the bond carries the interest rate commensurate with the credit rating of the state. As many of you know, and you picked up on the first hop, 5.75 for 20 years is an outrageous amount of money to pay in interest rate. That's not the fault of the issuer, that's not the fault of the university system, that's just what the market demands for something rated such as this. If the state of Florida were to guarantee it, there would be a material, as you know, a material drop, well over 200 basis points in my opinion today, probably more, which means that the cost to the taxpayers, to the university system, would be hundreds of thousands of dollars less. So my suggestion is at some point, somewhere, the state university system, the legislature, the governor, and people gives consideration to what appears to be about $1 billion worth of outstanding debt, which could carry an interest rate considerably less than it does today if the state of Florida would move from an implied guarantee to actually warranting or guaranteeing these particular bonds. So that's more of a just general observation of a way we can create value within this state of $20, $30, $40 million a year in interest savings if we want to take a creative approach. 575 is an outrageous amount of interest that this university is going to have to pay.
Chris, would you mention what the last bond issue that was, what the interest rate was on that?
Yes,
I think it was significantly less than that.
Yeah, and this is somewhat of a construct, and I'm very glad that Governor Morton has brought this up. I think his comments are right on point into the larger issue. Florida Atlantic University was approved by this board to build a parking garage in November. When they issued, the rate was just a little north of 2. I mean, it was a combined refunding new money deal, so that brought it down a little bit lower. But we've been in the 2 to 3% neighborhood, certainly with the not only implied guarantee of the state, but an explicit guarantee of the state, we could do even better. The reason we put this 575 in here goes back to the fact that this is a request that ultimately goes to the governor and cabinet. The state's interest rate for bonds is established through an estimating process. So they use this 575 for all bonds, whether it's road bonds, whether it's PICO bonds. My understanding, this is the state established rate. That's what's given to us by Division of Bond Finance. So because this is going to governor and cabinet, that's the rate they insist that we use. We beat that rate handily every time. We could certainly do better with a system credit or a state credit. So I don't want to discount the governor's comments either.
Is that interest only, or is that interest in principal? The 575?
That's the interest rate. It's always the amortizing date, so principal and interest rate.
So it's both.
Yeah, and I agree. It does tend to inflate the pro forma cost. I wish we could change that, but I've been assured by Bond Finance that we can't, that we have to be consistent with the other state issued through the state name credits.
Yes, sir.
Chris, I think that what you're saying is that by the time it gets to that formal approval process with the governor and the cabinet, that interest rate may be substantially different than that?
The governor and cabinet will be, the same materials that are presented to this board will be presented with that same rate to governor and cabinet when they actually, and it will be priced that way in the market. But, unless things change radically different, municipal bonds of this credit are not trading at 575. I mean, Governor Morton is exactly right. That would be an outrageously high rate in this market. So what will happen is the bonds will price significantly lower. There'll be, savings to the university. They'll get a better rate. It will just price differently. It does tend to somewhat, it's over conservative is what it is.
Yeah, the coverages would be better if you got lower rates. So,
My challenge to everybody in the legislature and everybody else responsible is to think about aggregating risk so you can lower the interest rate. If these were an obligation of the entire system, it would probably carry a lower interest rate. It would carry a lower interest rate yet if it was an implied or an actual guarantee of the state of Florida. And we're all desperately looking for ways to save money, to create value, and here's a way that we essentially as a state have already undertaken this obligation. We have the implied guarantee. We're not going to let assets of our university system go into default. This is an opportunity to create real value and to translate that into money that we can put into the classroom.
great idea.
I have a quick question. Governor, what would the difference be between if we can go to the market and get 2 or 2.25 or 2.5 with an implied guarantee, are we going to say 50 basis points or 100 basis points if it was an actual?
I would, if you look at the yield curve today, with AAA rated tax-exempt bonds versus A-rated or A-plus rated, you're probably looking over a 20-year period of 100 basis points. And that'll buy a lot of hot dogs.
I understand. With $1 billion of debt.
Okay, are there any other questions regarding FSU housing? If not, could I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. The motion passes. The second item on our debt approval process is a parking garage at Florida International University. Let me just mention that this garage was approved by this board a couple of years ago for various reasons. One of them may be cost, and one of them re-looking at it during the interim. It didn't get started because of the time frame. We decided we wanted to bring it back to this board to re-look at it because some of the numbers have changed. So with that, Chris, I'd like for you to give us our review.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is, again, a resolution of the board for the Division of Bond Finance to issue revenue bonds on behalf of Florida International University to finance a parking garage on the main campus. The amount not to exceed is $33.5 million. As Mr. Beard pointed out, this was previously approved by the board. Significant features that change, other than just the board has significantly changed. Bond finance always likes to see, a fresh set of approvals versus, different chair, different members. It looks better to have things be freshened up. The university has significantly increased its cash contribution into the project, and the university also is defeasing a set, I believe, of 1995 bonds for savings and to maintain good coverages. But that a formal defeasance has been added to the package. Then looking at the specifics as if this was a brand new project, what the university is looking to do is add 2,000 parking spaces. They have done a feasibility study. In response to the governor's letter, they've looked at 4 options. They've looked at what they're proposing, which is on-campus, university-managed parking. They've looked at on-campus, but privately managed parking. They've looked at on-campus, privately managed, but with more of a P3 model with like a ground lease, and they looked at straight parking off campus. What the independent study indicated, this was the most cost-effective option, the lowest cost to the students. They believe that, if they outsourced the parking management, it would cost significantly more to factor in a profit cost. If they did a ground lease, that would cost significantly more. If they did off-campus parking, they'd have transportation costs associated with parking. So the university has, just confirmed to the university that the course they had set on was the right course. The only other issue that has come up as a question as we've proposed this is, what about the fees? And the university is increasing the fee 10% to be able to afford this parking garage. In order to be on parity with the existing bonds, they have to maintain a 1.2 times cover. That's also what's required by our debt guidelines. Without the fee increase, for the fall only, the coverage is slightly south of 1.2, and that would probably also reflect negatively from a rating standpoint. They'd have to pay more. Further on the fees, so speaking to the university about the fees, right now, the FIU has a block fee of $88 per term. Some universities have block fees, some have per credit hour. But if you convert them all to sort of be an apples-to-apples comparison, the system average fee is just shy of $100. It's $98. That includes New College, which doesn't have a parking fee at all. All the other universities have a transportation excess fee that either pays for parking, pays for shuttle buses, pays for traffic enforcement, which is also a revenue collector as well, to administer those things. So the university has done its best to keep its fees and costs low on parking to the students, which is why it's slightly below the system average. They're committed to that policy, knowing that at the same time they have to meet their contractual obligations and maintain a minimal coverage, operate the shuttles. They can't commit never to increase the fee ever again and not operate the parking system that they've established. And I think also the university is not contemplating any further parking garages. They opened one up in 2010. They believe that would meet their needs. It has not. Their parking ratio, their service ratio has deteriorated. Their student satisfaction is terrible. It's a 67% satisfaction with parking, and they believe that this garage will satisfy their parking needs. They're looking at many innovative things. They're doing working with the local governments in the city of Sweetwater to improve transit. They're looking at alternative transportation. They're exploring all their options. I think, frankly, the university does not want to commit the footprint to parking. President Rosenberg has other plans for academic structures and research, and parking is really not what they want to do. But this has just been sort of forced upon the university just to meet the demands of students to attend class and faculty to have somewhere to park. So that is it sort of in a nutshell. I'd be glad again to drill down on any of the details on the project.
Are there any questions regarding the parking structure?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah. Can you just refresh my memory on the subject of private sector alternatives? Did they actually go to the private sector to seek to see if it was viable, or was it more the consultant determined that he didn't think it would be viable?
Well, what they have done, what FIU has done, is they looked at a consultant, which was Tim Haas, to sort of look at the viability. Excuse me. They also had a study done by Walker and Associates, who I would put more in the venue of sort of a parking facilitator, since they actually do parking. And I think they also looked at what FAU had done and said, well, we're sort of in the same geographic market, and that's not in the packet. But I do think the institution relied a good deal on what FAU's actually had a developer say, could we do like a park and fly type thing? And they said the numbers just don't support it, primarily because, of course, the university has peak parking demand. So there's, you know, that nighttime, afternoons, late morning, you can't find enough parking. Sundays, there's lots of parking. After, 11 o'clock until about 7 o'clock, most people at the university, unless they live in a residence hall, go home. Their parking becomes available, unlike an airport or a city garage where the demand is fairly constant. So I probably said too much on that.
Tim, Chris, would you mention the high end of the parking pricing? You've mentioned zero for the low end, but
yes, I'd be glad to do that.
We're at a little less than 100, going to maybe 100. So
on a semester basis and normalized for 15 credit hours, UF would be at roughly $120 for parking for a semester for 15 hours. FSU's at $130. FAMU has a block fee of $65. USF Tampa main campus is $45. St. Pete is $40. Sarasota Manatee branch doesn't have a parking fee. FAU is at $77. UWF is at $100. UCF is at $150. FIU again is at a block fee of $89. North Florida is at $60. Gulf Coast is at $120, and New College is at $0. System average is $98. And again, that's as normalized as I can make it for 15 credit hours.
Okay, are there any other questions?
I have a couple of questions, Governor.
Yes, sir.
I don't know whether it's best to ask you or to ask Chris, so you could give me some guidance, but is facilities involved in the long-term planning of the colleges? When they're setting their long-term goals and all of this, does facilities get involved and say, how is this going to affect what we need to build in the cost of the facilities long-term?
Well, I'd like to just take a shot at it, and then I'd like Chris to really give you the real answer. But certainly we're involved in the master plan approval process, which should take into consideration where these universities are going long-term. And I know that the university boards of trustees are very engaged in what they need to do. And density in these urban campuses is really important, that you save space for your growth, and the universities that are much younger have got land all around. They don't build parking garages. That's why the numbers are so different. But Chris, why don't you finish that up?
Sure, and I appreciate Governor Huizenga giving me a heads up sort of on this topic, so I'm a little more, I think, prepared to answer the question. Here's where the universities and the Board of Governors are involved. We're involved at a staff level on the educational plant survey. Board staff visit each institution on a 5-year rotating basis, and the academic needs for space are presented to the survey team, which is headed up by Ken Ogletree, who many of you know and have met and has been our system architect for many years. That process is really driven by the PICO dollars. That's driven by state dollars and academics. As far as the auxiliary facilities and housing, athletics, contracts and grants facilities. The board's involvement is at the fiscal side. The board's involvement has not been as strong on master planning. The board has master planning regulations, but in terms of like, as I know the trustees, look at maps, see waterways and roadways, and get the planners up here to give you the vision of what the system is going to look like. The Board of Governors is not engaged with that in terms of facilities placement, is what I would characterize it as. We set the regulations and the bounds, and the board historically has been very involved on academic construction, but not as involved in terms of policy or strategy of auxiliary facilities. It's focused on academics.
Chairman, could I add?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's quite great.
I was just going to kind of add.
That's fine, Chancellor, yeah.
With crisis comes opportunity, though, I think. What we haven't talked about today, I don't think, is the incredible dive in PICO funding to zero. Doesn't get much deeper dive than that. And I think there are some people, not many, who are sitting out there waiting for PICO to spring back again and then going back to the business as we did it before PICO evaporated. Where's the opportunity here? A lot of us have said, not just me, but a lot of people smarter than I have said that since we have on one hand no PICO dollars, we not only need to look as a state for how we're going to meet the long-term facilities needs of the state university system, not to mention Florida College system, not to mention the K through 12 system, but at the same time we should also be looking at how we evaluate what those needs are. That there may be an opportunity here to reevaluate the process itself. It served us very well for a long period of time. 10-year plans, 5-year plans, getting on that PICO list in a 3-year, 4-year rotational basis, approved at the board level, approved at the Board of Governors level, served us very well for a long time. It may, in similar fashion, somehow serve us well going forward. But I think if all we do is A, wait for a new source of revenue, and B, while we're waiting for that, not re-examine how we decide who gets a new chemistry building, who gets a new classroom building, the facilities needs of the state, I think we're naive. So I really do think we should be in the business of, as good as that system served us for so long, I think we should begin to, at some point soon, keep working on the new revenue stream, but also begin to discuss the possibilities for a different way to build a mousetrap on the needs assessment of all of this going forward. There will always only be so much money, and I think the responsibility is to make sure that we are organizing our universities in a way, first and foremost, to meet their academic and programmatic needs, which should then drive the facilities needs, not the other way around. And I'm not sure, somewhere in the past, we didn't get a little confused on that one and maybe stepped into some facilities requests, et cetera, that we would have liked to have had, maybe even gotten funded, but perhaps didn't meet the exact needs of not only the university, but the system as a whole.
That's very well said, Chancellor Brogan, and that covers two of the questions that I had. The first was, Chris, do we have a schedule of what to expect? In our businesses as we plan, we're looking out 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Obviously we have our depreciation items and things that are necessary, but then there's also capital plans that we evaluate and make a plan for, so that we can make sure that we have cash that's available. And I was curious, do we have a schedule like that with our university system right now?
We do have a schedule very similar to that for the first time this year. In the request of the universities in putting together their 5-year capital improvement plans, the statutory requirement is only for the academic, which is the PICO funds. But we actually, because the board adopted guidelines requiring such, I don't want to take the credit for it, the board said, what about these other facilities? What about the facilities that could be funded from the student fee, for example? We asked them to put that in the 5-year plan. We asked the universities to make a plan to show us their non-academic facilities or mixed-use type facilities. So we do have all that data. It's been very helpful, particularly to the capital improvement projects, I think, but that information has not been provided yet, as of yet, to the board or, synthesized, but that really is just a matter of the board asking for it. Basically, if that's the pleasure of the committee, we certainly be glad to put it. Our cycle tends to run. We ask the schools to submit their projects August 1 in preparation for the legislative cycle. But we have that data, and I'd be glad to share that with you or any and all board members.
I'm asking. I think it would be helpful for facilities and most likely the other Board of Governors as well. And that kind of comes to, the reason where my questioning was going is I was reading in the FIU, they stated that one of their goals for 2010 to 2015 was their university's World Ahead strategic plan, which was to increase enrollment by 2,000 students, 2,000 academically qualified students per year. So that's why I was saying, we could see that parking was going to be a problem, that it was going to be a need. So when you made the comment of, hey, it was kind of forced upon them, no, I think it was more self-elected. And so I think that in looking at what are the goals, what is the capacity for the state to bond, what are the capacity for the schools to bond, what is the long term, should we be looking at excellence and higher? I know that you're addressing it now, President Rosenberg, the graduation rates, but in reviewing the numbers and looking at graduation rates in the 40% range and saying, hey, our goal is to add 2,000 students a year, which drives the cost of buildings and cost you land that you ultimately wanted to use for other classroom projects, really evaluating what is the long-term effect of that and the cost to the degrees that we're producing for our students. So that's just an overview, a thought to be, for all of us to be focusing on, because obviously we won't be able to bond forever, and I don't think that the days of these incredibly low rates are going to last forever.
Right.
And as we all know, having had credit card debt from one time or another, fortunately most of mine is gone from my younger days. As the rates go up, it's a bear to get out from under that. So, we're seeing the effects of that with our PICO dollars, where we have approximately, the majority of our $1 billion goes to pay interest on our bonds. So we have nothing going forward. So I think it's a today issue, but it's also certainly the health of our state and the health of our university system long term. So just having grown up with, as being told my family, it's the best in the industry is not necessarily the largest, but the one that makes the most profit. So I think that looking at applying that to our school system is maybe being the largest or having one of the largest enrollments of students isn't as important as how many we turn out, how many are getting jobs, the things that we're starting to measure now and just kind of reevaluating as we go into a tougher economic time, our stance in the future of the university system.
Great comments. Governor Tropa.
I have a clarification, but I'll use this as an example for the numbers. Chris, if it's 5.75 for 30 years, and they're showing a 10% increase this year, a 7.5% increase in transportation access, next year another 10%. If we approve this, are we assuming that we're approving these increases, A, and B, if it comes down at a lower interest rate, do they still need this kind of transportation access increase?
Okay, let me, if I may, Mr. Chair.
I'll let you answer that.
Dr. Chopra, good question. What we're showing this in the projections, and what that shows is with those proposed fee increases, improving coverage out through 16-17. The Board of Trustees at FIU has not yet approved the fee increase effective for this fall. They'll do that as part of their general approval of fee increases, if any. Most institutions do that in May. They wait till after session. They see what happens. Sometimes the legislature actually imposes fee increases or imposes a tuition increase, and then the trustees have to carry out the law and increase a certain given fee. Other times it's some discretion to the universities. They can, and then some fees come to the Board of Governors for approval, further approval, and we've chosen June as our time to approve that so the students know what to pick. And of course, I'm telling you, you know this already, of course, but then some other fees are approved locally. So for the financing, FIU is going to have to approve this increase to meet the coverage. So as it moves forward to Governor and Cabinet, that 1 year of fee increase will be assumed. That's what's going to be looked at by the rating agencies. The out years, that's what they had originally proposed. I believe with this further guidance that we've received, I think FIU is going to do everything they can to not increase that fee beyond what's minimally required to operate. So we may not see that ascent coverage right now shows ascending from 129 to a 1.67. If they keep the fees lower, the coverage will, be less. They don't want to show bare minimum coverage, but they want to show reasonable coverage. They're also going to, look, I don't want to say again, look for however many times it is to see how can they cut down on the expenses. So in terms of the interest rate savings, what the university can do, they can, yes, they can decide to issue, they can issue less, or they can reduce their cash contribution. They could put it into reserve. They can put it into, prepay some of the debt. So that gives them some flexibility for historically what they'll do is they'll issue, they'll put the whole project in there. If the project comes in on budget and there's savings, they'll put that back into the parking system to build up the reserves, which means in the future they can keep the fee increases, help hold down the fee increases.
Well, and if the interest rate's lower than what we projected, then they've got better coverage going into. We don't know that answer yet.
Right.
Governor Beard?
Yes.
Can you just clarify on the increase in the fees? Wouldn't that be an increase that would have to come here? No. It's not.
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Governor Coons, the board has delegated certain fees to the trustees.
Right.
There's what they call the triad fees, the athletics, health, activity and service fees. There's a cap. They can't exceed 40% of tuition. There's other fees like transportation that, again, have been delegated to the trustees within certain metes and bounds. Other fees, capital improvement, do have to come to the board. That's something this just is about.
What is currently delegated,
It
doesn't necessarily mean it's forever delegated, because what is delegated can also be changed, theoretically, right?
I would probably defer that. I think that's correct. I would defer that question to
I'm
our
just trying
council.
it just feels like something's getting approved with an assumed increase in fees down the road, which isn't.
Any projections are typically,
Right.
It's a projection.
But they're projecting an increase, right, I mean, but the point is, it might not happen.
Yeah, it might not. No, that's right. That's right. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not on the committee, but
I'm not either.
When I was briefed, we had this conversation, and it brought back to me the issue that while we try to have a position here of controlling fees as well as controlling tuition, in fact, there are many things out there that we're not controlling, and one happens to be this. And so it is a little worrisome or bothersome to me that by approving this, you kind of approve the fact that, yeah, they are going to increase the fees. So I said to him, well, if they're going to get more parking, aren't they going to get more revenue? And he said, not necessarily, because everybody pays a parking fee, and they may already be collecting all of that revenue. They're just not providing one parking space for every student. They provide a ratio of parking because not everybody is there all the time. Now, one thing we didn't talk about is in the proposal, it kind of said we're going to increase students, was the number 2,000 every year? Well, that 2,000 increase then means that 2,000 more students, if they do that, are paying more parking. Right. So in fact, they are generating more revenue by that. They may say that amount of revenue isn't enough to cover the bond, therefore we have to do the fee. But we're kind of getting backdoored here on fees. And so that's the part that I think we have to kind of look at. I mean, should we be requiring when we do this that we approve it, but with a caveat that the fees cannot be increased without something more. And I don't know if we can do that. I don't know if we want to do that, but it does seem to me that if we're trying to control fees, it's important that we have some mechanisms in there to put pressure points out there to make sure we have some input.
I have a personal observation on this. My daughter goes to FIU for a master's at night.
Can't hear you.
I said, my daughter goes to FIU for a master's at night. She's a first grade teacher. So, and she will call me at 5 o'clock before a 6 o'clock class and says, Dad, you're going to stay on the line until I get a parking space because there's no place to park. And you could fix this. And I said, no, I can't fix it. I can't fix it. It's not, well, call the president. I said, no, there'll be a quid pro quo of some sort, and I'm not going to call the president for your parking space. and so I have great concern, and the president and I have talked about his growth in his student body. That's totally different than the fact that these kids have no place to park right now on this campus in rush in the peak time, and they need places to park. Now we can decide not to build dorms, but if you're going to make them not live on campus, you got to find places for them to park when they drive to campus if they're not going to live there. And we need good coverage. It needs to make financial sense, but there is a very real need at FIU right now for this parking. So, and I don't know how we're going to do it, but that's my observation.
Well, I agree with you. In every university that I'm on, parking always is the issue, particularly when most of the classes are going on. You're running for a class and you're trying to find a parking place close to it or whatever. It's a bad situation at all of them, and it's hard to get it right. But I'd like to go ahead and call the question if we can. Wendy. Oh, Wendy?
Well, I had
call the question.
Yeah.
I had asked earlier, I guess, on the question of Governor Tripp about this parking, because one questions I had, I certainly appreciate Chair Colson's daughter having problems getting a parking spot. But sometimes, is it really, and for this university, is it all part? I mean, does it just matter maybe the parking isn't as close to the class as they'd like, or that kind of thing? Because sometimes that's just part of a university, and it is tough to get parking. And when I asked the question about the parking garage and the need, and would this end up costing us money or the students money later, I was told, the parking garages are generally money makers for the campuses. Doesn't sound like that's necessarily the case here. So what kind of assurance are we going to have? It sounds like there really isn't any assurance that this isn't going to end up on the backs of either us or the students. I say us.
No, when we're talking about coverage, we're talking about minimum coverages, and that means that 20% of this, even at the minimum, is a profit, I guess you would call it, is over and above the debt service. So that's just the minimum that we're talking about. And let's get this in perspective. $10 a quarter is $2 a month, or $2.50 or something. That's what we're talking about. It's a couple of Dairy Queens or something. So I'm just worried that we're a little overanalyzing this a little bit. And I know I've talked to the administration. He's okay with it. He doesn't want to see rates go up if they can't. But we're not even at the system average yet. So so I'd like to see us go ahead and pass this because there's a need. But
can I just make a comment on that? When we say they're not making any money, at FIU, the parking garages rent out certain parts of it to, I guess we'd call it, businesses. And so they do make money in the sense that they are rented, they are making a parking garage, but the ground floor might have a bank, or it might have a cafe, or it might have a cleaning service or something.
A restaurant.
It is
we maybe not need to build
no,
it
is mixed use, so they are making we talked about this about 6 months ago. Why did it
We
cost
did.
so much, if you recall?
As I recall.
And we did say that it's costing a little bit more for the building of the garage because we're using it for, it's a spread out campus, we're using it for an eating place or a cleaning service or something else. So I think it does generate a little bit, but I do agree with you, maybe the student can't get.
Well, I was going to say, is that the reason the students can't get parking? That we're building another
No,
parking garage
no,
because
no.
we're renting it out, the space is
No,
out
I
someone
don't,
else?
no, I don't think that's the case. I just think that, you know, it's a good way to make use of part of this building.
Well, okay, but is that the case, or are some of the spots going to somebody other than the
No.
students?
No.
There's about 20,
It's a
what is it,
design.
35,000 feet of other space in the garage that, for example, the police department at the campus is in a parking garage on the first floor.
It's a
They're
building,
using
it's
it.
an office building, not a parking spot.
Well, no, it's just that they just take a sliver piece. They've designed the building so that they can put some office space underneath on the first floor. And I think design-wise, and it's great because
it's
you're
not
not
the
seeing this
spaces
big
that are going
structure.
away.
You're seeing kind of a retail space on it. So they've got a little of this built into here, and none of the income is built into it. So.
I don't mean to disagree, Chairman Beer, but I believe that when I read it, I thought, Chris can correct me, that it assumed that all the retail was leased in the pro forma in order to get to the minimum coverage. It's all right.
for the
It's not a significant
No,
amount.
for the pro forma, they don't assume any of that retail revenues in the pro forma. There will be some retail revenues if FAU puts some retail in. And I think with Parking Garage 5 was very informative. You know, originally, FIU planned to put in substantive amount of retail. They did put in some retail, but they found that the cost benefit of making as much retail as originally proposed wasn't there. So instead they put in classrooms, they put in their emergency operations center in a nice centralized location, and I think a clinic type space. They tried to make the best use of the shell, again, on the ground floor because they are limited land. They're trying to make use of the first floor for other uses. I think this is one of the things that President Benson and the task force really advocated for was mixed use. All the systems are doing mixed use. One of our, and we'll talk about this in the next item when we get to it, we have a lot of boundaries that keep us from doing mixed use. I would like to be able to put that retail revenue, anticipated retail revenue on the pro forma. To do that, we have to meet the functional relationship test, and we have to go through, another year. And maybe that's good, but it would take another year to get this deal before this board to add those retail revenues because we're, in trying to avoid something bad, which I think most people say, trying to subsidize, say, athletics with housing or subsidize it with parking, because these do make a little bit of money because the coverage is positive. It's required to be positive. To avoid that with the functional relationship test, we're avoiding the good functional relationship test of retail. And then you can, well, it's speculative. How do you know the retail is going to be there? What if it doesn't come in? Well, FIU is a great example. I'm getting a little bit worked up. They took something when the retail didn't come in as promised. They put in classroom space. They put in an emergency operations center. These universities are, they're well positioned and they always have a good plan B. So, I just think they've done so well with Parking 5. I think they'll do very good with Parking 6.
I move.
Yes, sir.
As I understand that their pro forma is based on, again, an interest rate of 5.75.
Correct.
Will the university recalculate what they charge for parking and fees based on debt service coverage ratios if that interest rate comes in at 3.75? And why are we programming 10% plus increases in that price knowing that the interest rate's going to be considerably less than what's in that pro forma.
Because we're required to.
If I may, I think what the university in the pro forma is trying to demonstrate that it would make sure there was strong coverage. Now with this different guidance from the governor's office, from this board to say, your primary focus must be to keep those fees to the absolute minimum. That's what they've historically done. I don't want to speak for the institution. I'd have to leave that to the team, and I don't know if they can make that assertion today or not, to say, if the rate comes in below the 575, will they guarantee that they'll, reduce the fees to the bare minimum needed, with good, to still maintain a good credit? I don't know. President Rosenberg would have to speak to that.
But that's merely an observation. I'm looking at the yield curve right now if these things were sold today. And I see what the yield would be, and it's going to be materially less than what we're using. So just as a general observation, if we're using feasibility studies that we know are distorted to the extent that the interest rates almost double what might result, I think it leads to sometimes erroneous conclusions. And it's not as easy to get your arms around something when I look at something and the numbers are going to change radically. That's just a general observation. I think that as we move into the future, the one issue that I would like to mention would be the governor has issued a letter. We've got, many of us are interested in privatization of certain things and whether or not it's feasible or not. There's a preconceived notion out there in the world that because of the ability to use tax-exempt capital, that private enterprise cannot figure out a better way or a more efficient way to do certain things, and many consultants go out there and market that. I think that in the future, not today, I think enough time has been spent on this, and having tried to find parking on that campus, they desperately need it. I suffered that myself. But I do think I'd like to see us actually think about going out to the private market and getting quotes or bids as opposed to opinion. I think that would be more conclusive and would yield, I think, a more binary kind of a decision, yes or no, as opposed to just the hypothetical of an opinion.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Just one comment. I think you're absolutely right. And if once we have a schedule and we're looking 2 or 3 years out, that'll give us much more leeway to be able to reach out to the private sector or to be able to make a case for public-private partnerships or to be able to do retail or whatnot and have the leeway going into it to have it approved so that by the time we get here, we're able to make the best of the opportunity.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I move the resolution.
Thank you.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. Good job, Chris. Oh, any opposed? I thought everybody. All in favor. Thanks. Unanimous. The last item on our agenda is the legislative budget request. And it was mentioned in the discussions we just had that there's a lot of change going on. We've got the governor looking at things. We've got our task force is very active right now. President Bentz has been involved with the legislature in the last today is doing a great job. It looks very positive about what's going on. And Chris, would you give us an update on what's on the forefront?
Yes, I'm very glad to give an update, and you're very right, Mr. Chair, to recognize President Bentz, her staff, particularly Janice Gilley, has just been tireless on this issue. And as you know, the House Appropriations Committee is going to introduce a bill, a committee bill, which is terrific, that really hits all 5 of the strategic recommendations of the SUS Facilities Task Force. And I know when we were talking about it, President Bentz was like, look, this is going to be a multi-year process. If we can get 1 or 2 of these things, this will be amazing. And to get some recognition of all 5 of the strategic recommendations, I just think it's a credit to the work of the task force, this board, Chair Colson, and you, Mr. Beard, putting together the task force. The committee meeting's at 4 o'clock tomorrow in the Capitol. Hopefully, these meetings will be done by then, and as many as possible can come and support this very good, what appears to be a very good bill. It would provide some flexibility on the financing. It really clarifies what the universities can do in terms of public-private partnership. For years, there's been no real clear guidance on what we can do, how far we can go. We have a very prescriptive bonding statute. We have nothing in the P3 arena, so we don't even know how far do we go, how far legally can the universities go. That's been a real holdback. The issue, we've talked about planning. The board members who've been here for a while know that the concurrency payments were a key function this board approved and worked with the local host communities. That funding evaporated in 2010 and has not been replaced, and we had no idea how do we deal with growth management issues. The law says it's all driven around funding and there's no funding. How does that work? That's addressed. I'm very pleased that that's addressed in this proposed bill. So that's the good news. We don't have anything introduced yet in the Senate. I'm optimistic, but that's where this needs to go next after it, assuming it clears the House of Representatives. And, you have to have both chambers, and then you have to have the governor's support. I just want to thank, again, the task force members, President Betts, all the university lobbyists, particularly Janice, have just been pushing and pushing and pushing this issue. I think it's already resulted. We have not yet seen the budget release for capital. That should be in the next couple days. I think we will see that maintenance money that I know we have beat that drum for at least 2, maybe 3 years. The universities will see a significant amount of funding for basic maintenance. Last year as a system we got $7 million. If we asked for 50, if we can do better than 7, it's certainly to the good. But $7 million is not enough for even one of our larger institutions to even stay caught up on the backlog. So that's a real positive outcome. We still have a long way to go in session, and we'll just have to see where we stand at the end. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Any questions? Questions? We all right? No. All right. Well, look, thank you all very much. That's the last item on our agenda. Thank you, Chris, for your reports and your knowledge on all this stuff. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
If you could just direct me, not for this meeting, but for whether it's this committee or someplace else, or maybe staff already knows the answer and they can just tell me offline, but is it through facilities that we would look at, for example, utilization of the building? I know just from a community college experience, a lot of classes,
I would think
people don't like to do classes on Fridays, and so, but if we had spread them out, we wouldn't have a need for as many buildings, parking, et cetera. Has that already been addressed and looked at?
We've got a report that talks about utilization, but yes, it would come through under this committee.
That's, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead. I was just going to say that's one of those issues that we have done within the PICO process. You're required to look at space utilization, but it's another one that we always need to refine because universities change, and that should stay in a constant state of refinement. So back to my original comments, as we move forward on this issue of how are we going to organize ourselves and what funding are we going to ask for and what are the requirements to get funding, space utilization has got to be front and center in that issue. I have a foot in the world of K through 12, and I knew when I had to build an elementary school as a superintendent, it wasn't because I thought it would be nice to lower the counts at other schools and have a half-full elementary school for a change. I already knew I had more than enough students in the other schools to already fill that school before it was constructed, and I had to prove that in order to get the money in order to construct the facility. So space utilization is that way. To request to be able to build classroom space and not justify it by demonstrating that you have appropriate space utilization is not appropriate. And
so that comes through this committee, though, and that's done then when money's asked for through PICO.
Yes, ma'am.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
You done?
If not,